Good morning, my dear fangs. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the cavern if you're new here. I hope you all are doing amazing and have your coffee or tea, whatever your preference may be. We're talking about one of my favorite musicals of all time, although this isn't a review. It's not. I was curious if Sweeney Todd actually existed. Now, I watched the musical and I received the book as a gift a long time ago from a loved one. I read it and found the story was completely different from the movie. So the movie, as some of you know, is about a barber whose shop is above a bakery, Mrs. Levitt's, specifically, of course. While Sweeney Todd is trying to prepare for his revenge, he kills many people in the meantime, which supplies Mrs. Levitt's business because it's hard to get meat during that time period. Which I believe is the Depression, but I could be completely wrong. The book, on the other hand, portrays Sweeney Todd as a thief and kills people to steal their precious belongings. The bodies are still used for the meat pies, but he's killing for a different reason, not revenge. It wasn't a bad read, but not what I was expecting at all. However, it did raise the question, who was Sweeney Todd, and was he real or made up? And is that why his story can be kind of interchangeable? Well, in my research, some people felt that Sweeney Todd was made up. He's an urban legend, similar to Bloody Mary or the Hookman legend. Sweeney Todd was first depicted in a mid-18th century penny dreadful. I don't know if you know what that is, apart from the show. Basically, what a penny dreadful was a horror story that usually was printed in the newspaper. It wasn't printed in any other format, not like other stories. And that's why, and you could actually read them for a penny. They were dirt. Because everybody thought horror was dreadful. Because, well, horror kind of is dreadful if you look at it. It's depressing sometimes, it's morbid, it's dark, it's dreary, there's not always a happy ending, hence penny dreadful. So, the story was called The String of Pearls. An author who wrote 2 books about Todd, named Peter Haining, believed there was evidence that Todd actually existed. During his research, he found that Sweeney Todd was a child of the East End slums. He was born on the 26th of October, 1756, at either 85, 87, or 89 Brick Lane to an impoverished silk weaver family. His mother, barely 20 years of age, and his father, a terrible alcoholic, would regularly abuse his wife and child. Todd's parents disappeared in 1768, which caused Todd to embark on a life of crime, which landed him in Newgate prison at the age of 14. There he learned to be a barber by a man who shaved the heads of the condemned men. Upon release, Todd set himself up as a barber, first on Hyde Park Corner, and then at his famous address in Fleet Street. Eventually, Sweeney Todd was executed for his murders in 1802. However, here's where things get a little confusing. There's no record of any such trial or execution, or even the childhood imprisonment in Newgate. It seems the information Haining provided was false. You would think that is where our story ends. Well, not exactly. In 14th century France, near Notre Dame, a local baker was doing exceptionally well, putting out a series of meat pies that drew crowds in from miles around. Strangely enough, the bakery in which the pies were created was located near a barber, the owner of which was connected to a string of strange disappearances. The police were led to this shop after finding a stray dog that was intent on going to the barber shop. The stray dog was attracted to the area by the scent of his long-lost master. After the police searched the area for the man, they reported to have come across something far more than they bargained for. They uncovered piles of human bones and remains beneath the barber's shop and the baker's. Police discovered that the barber and baker were in business together, serving up a collection of locally sourced meat pies. The duo had been doing this for 3 years before the police found them. They targeted tourists and stray wanderers of the streets. After the men were found guilty, they were burned at the stake for their collection of crimes. The area was so caught up in the crime that many of the local shops and buildings were burnt too, on top of the perpetrators. So basically, when they were burned, they burned them in too close a proximity, in my opinion, and the flames kind of caught fire to the other buildings in the surrounding area. Yeah. They were restored, though, later in mid-19th century. Today, the building stands as something a little different from what it was back then. It can actually be visited today, but it rests in a Parisian police department motorcycle garage. Totally different. So what are your thoughts? I found it honestly interesting how Sweeney Todd might have existed. I'm not sure if the man in France was named Sweeney Todd. I don't honestly know what their names were. And it's interesting if that inspired the story of Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett. Especially since usually urban legends all have a place of origin. Something started it. Something or someone. Usually there's a backstory. Kind of like Dracula. We know Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Dracul, was the one behind the famous story Dracula. And I'm not going into that. I'm not going into that. Save that for another video for all of you. I'm not going to go on my ramblings about that. I honestly thought it was also interesting how the story of Sweeney Todd wasn't in the same era as Jack the Ripper, but Jack the Ripper kind of came a few decades later. The 18th century, I believe, is when Jack the Ripper was. And I think what was so interesting about Jack the Ripper is he actually didn't kill that many, but he's notorious. Everyone knows the name. And I think what makes these killers, like Sweeney Todd and Jack the Ripper, so famous and fascinating is the mystery surrounding them. There weren't many ways to find these types of killers during their time periods. It was easy for them to disappear without a trace. Scary to think about, but compelling nonetheless. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it and researching for this, because I'm obsessed with research, as some of you probably know. If you did like this video, please like and subscribe to join the family. I greatly appreciate it. To the new subscribers, thank you so much for your support. You make it all worthwhile, and it's amazing to see the numbers grow. Later tonight, I'll share my guilty pleasure of what musicals are my favorites, because yes, that is a guilty pleasure of mine. And I didn't actually realize how many musicals I actually like, and it's kind of embarrassing, I guess you could say, because most people don't like musicals. They kind of think they're a little unrealistic, as my husband would say, because people just burst out dancing and singing out of nowhere, and that's not how the world works. But I, for some reason, just like it. If you can't wait for that, click the bell icon to be notified as soon as it's released. Next week, I'll share my review of the film Don't Worry, Darling, which I just watched. It's on HBO Max if any of you are interested in watching that before my review comes out. Thank you again. Take care and have a relaxing weekend. Bye, everyone.